All right, well, this is inorganic groups. We're going to talk about the D8 group module. We will touch quickly on existing solutions for D7, what those look like in D8, and then on to our new friend, the group module. So a little about me real quick. That's me. I work for a full-service agency out of Reston, Virginia called Mobomo. If you've been around the DC area, you may have heard the name. I live and work remotely out of Birmingham. Married, coming up on 20 years to my wonderful college sweetheart. Got 2 kids at home, homeschool them, so we're all home all the day long. So pray for me. I got my bachelor's in Alabama and my master's at NYU in French, of all things. And yeah, I am an amateur musician. Love to play bluegrass, big fish head. That's me everywhere, so just first and last name with 1 T on Scot, please. And been doing Drupal. I did a tiny little bit in Drupal 5, but mostly Drupal 6 is where I came on board, and tons of Drupal 7, mostly on the front end, but also, got obviously start diving into module development before too long. And I do my best to contribute to the community here and there as time permits. Specifically around group lately, but we'll get to that in just a minute. As far as Mobomo goes, we have a pretty huge portfolio, a lot of government work. We do, I specifically work on USGS like 95% of my time, so that's why that's highlighted, but we've done work with NASA, FDIC, all kinds of government orgs, lots of enterprise and private stuff too. So quick slide on why I decided to do this talk. This is actually the 3rd time I've done this one, so I think it might have to be retired after this, or at least reworked, but if you look out there, there's a couple versions of this out there. When I originally picked this topic, my original reasons were specifically around working with USGS. We use organic groups extensively throughout the site. If you click around usgs.gov and look around in the different science centers and the different mission areas, all that stuff is built around taxonomy. Last year I did a talk about how that's sort of built based on organic groups in 7. So you can check that out if you like. We did want to just explore the idea unofficially, what a migration for USGS looked like from D7 to D8, and just what the options were out there for D8 in a group situation. I am not an expert on either module. I have used D7 organic groups, like I said, quite a bit with USGS, but again, not an expert, so I'll do my best to answer your questions. I will not have all the answers. Just one more clarification that this is not like OG versus group, who comes out on top, who's going to win, who's the best. There are similarities, obviously, and we'll get into that, but point is not who's better, just get that out of the way. So the central question would be, why or why not organic groups? Do we have specific reasons to use one or the other here? So both modules do several things at their core really well. They have the concept of a group, obviously, and you have related content types. So you can say that pages are group content, or have content types that are only available to groups to manage and create. You obviously have to have some sort of membership in a group so people can join the group, leave the group. You also have, both modules do really well custom roles and permissions. But these are roles and permissions within the group ecosystem, so they're completely separate from Drupal's high-level roles and permissions that you're probably more familiar with. And one thing that I think is essential for both modules is that they make almost no assumptions about your use case. So when you turn it on, you don't magically have groups that work. There's no assumptions, very few assumptions, other than you need memberships and things like that. We'll get into the details here in a sec, and I forgot that, screwed up that. So in D7, we'll talk about organic groups really quickly about what's good about it. It's obviously pretty widely adopted. Everybody's probably heard of organic groups, at least. Has pretty good API developer experience. There's lots of easy functions to call, just to OG group to put somebody in a group, OG ungroup to take them out of a group, or to take content in and out of a group. So sort of associate and dissociate content and members with a group. It has all the features I mentioned before with the roles and permissions. One thing that's kind of cool, can be cool about organic groups, it has the option to override default permissions. So if you set up a group type with a certain set of default permissions, and then you have one specific instance of that group type, and you want that one to function a little bit differently, you have the option to override that. So you can check a little box, and then magically you can use permissions that are specific to that group that override the group type, if that makes sense. Tons of views integration. There's some blocks that come out of the box with it. Field access stuff, so you can base field access on whether you're in a group or not, what your role is in that group, even if you are in the group. It has integration with registration, so when you're creating a new user account, you can go ahead and associate them with whatever groups you want right off the bat. And there's just a ton of contributed modules for OG in 7. In USGS, we make a lot of use of OG menu, OG taxonomy, workbench moderation, Scald. Does anybody use Scald out here for media management by chance? Yeah? All right, I got one. Scald's the bomb. If you never used Scald in Drupal 7, it's awesome. A lot of the guys involved in that helped bring media into core in 8. But those modules all define what you're used to: taxonomy, menu, workbench stuff, media, but within the context of organic groups. So you have extra permissions to say, this type, this role can create or add taxonomy terms to our group-owned vocabularies. Nobody else can use these vocabularies. They're siloed off for your group. Same thing for menus, and of course it doesn't interfere with core stuff, so you still have the high-level menus and taxonomy that you can use, but you have the ability to associate taxonomy, menus, moderation stuff to the group. And you can see how widely used it was with this cool little graphic that Emma Z did. And on the con side of organic groups, there's some of these aren't really cons, they're just kind of the things that annoy people about it. It relies on entity reference fields to tie the group and its content. So, and Amitai, one of the main maintainers of organic groups himself, specifically called this abusing the field API, because you have to add fields to create that, or enable, I should say, enable that group functionality on a content type. So you add an OG, or it's just a group field, it's just a checkbox like is group, to make a content type a group type. And you can check, uncheck or check that box to make that specific node a group or not. You have a field for that permissions override thing I mentioned. OG vocab, the OG taxonomy module makes use of the field API in this way. You have to have a field on the content type that is for all the vocabularies for that group context. It's a little complicated. It can be kind of confusing. On the UX side, it's the field part of it, and then you've got this configuration per group type, which is fine, it makes sense. You obviously have to have that, but it's in a completely separate area from the content configuration. Sometimes that throws people off. D8, I used to have a line here that said it was completely stalled, but it looks like it's kind of picking up momentum again. So something to keep an eye on. Maybe D8 organic groups will make a comeback, but at the moment there's not a stable release for it at all. So, and this is just a slide. You probably can't make too much sense of that from there, but because it's garbled right here. But you have the different fields that can be added, and you see the different content types. These are the different node types that have the group functionality enabled on them. Awesome. Phantom boxes. So for group, I've just jumped right to D8 because it was a complete rewrite of the D7 module. So there is a D7 group module. I've never used it. It has, a good bit of usage, nowhere near organic groups, of course, but it has quite a bit of usage. But they completely rewrote the module from the ground up using, all the object-oriented goodness and all the new D8 hotness. So in this, version, you've got groups that are a fully fieldable entity, top-level citizen of the Drupal ecosystem once you turn it on. It really has a really good developer experience and API. Everything's object-oriented, extensible, plugins, the whole shebang. So the developer is very meticulous of the code on this particular module. So if you look at it, you'll see what I mean. This will make more sense in a second. I'll show you a graphic, but there's a separate membership or relationship entity. So essentially there's a defined entity between the group itself and the thing you're associating with the group. That's a kind of an intermediary relationship. I'll show you that in a second. That comes in really handy in certain functions. One of the pros I put here is that a single group can't override group type settings. So a group will always function how you set them up to be. So if you set up a certain group type, you set the permissions and all the checkboxes. You don't have that thing in organic groups that I mentioned where you can override and say, well, this group of this type, I want to function a little bit differently. You can't do that here, which could be a pro. You have a little more control. You know exactly what to expect. Whoops, let me go back to that. So this is kind of the quick screenshot of just what group looks like when you go to the main group page within the config. So you can see it's just got your, all your fieldable entity type stuff, manage fields, manage form display, all that good stuff. Excuse me. On the con side, and a lot of these actually have gone away since I put this together. They're very quickly fixing some of these sort of gripes that people have had with it since it started. There was some confusing things about the UI, and I think there's a few things to me that are still a little confusing, but they make sense once you get used to using it. Some of the wording is just a little confusing. Again, they've reworded some of these things already. Missing integration with config entities. So out of the box, group only supports content entities. Does everybody understand the distinction in D8 between a content entity and a config entity? More or less? No. All right. So really quickly put, best I can summarize it is, a content entity is what you would expect it to be. A node, a user object, a taxonomy term. But when it comes to taxonomy vocabularies or a menu, not a menu link, but a menu, I'm sure there's lots of other things. Contact forms, views definitions. There's all kinds of stuff that are in config. So you can export them and import them through the config management thing, through a YAML file. And those entities at the moment do not have full integration with this module. So all you can do at the moment is to integrate real entities, content entities. So things like nodes, obviously, users comes out of the box. But adding other things, like if you had a custom entity type, you can easily integrate it with it as long as it's a normal content entity. But this issue is really lively, and people are actively trying to fix this because it's a real problem. If you're trying to build a microsite for a specific, one instance of a group, and you want them to have their own menu and their own whatever, there's a lot of missing pieces. And then I mentioned the same point again as a con too, because if you do want the functionality to be able to override a group specific, make a specific instance of a group function differently than the type, you just can't do that. Not currently anyways. Quick example I put up here of what I think a little confusing about the group configuration. So this is an example of when you're adding a group, if you don't check all the right boxes, and you'll see what I mean as I go through the demo real quick. But when you create a new group, you can get stuck in this place where you're creating that intermediary relationship that I mentioned. And then when you're done, it takes you to that instead of the thing that you created that's in the group. It'll make a lot more sense in the demo. But there's quite a few little defaults that you'll see. It'll make a lot more sense in the demo. That are a little confusing at times. So this is a quick, Mike Anello actually put this together. I know he's here somewhere. But this came out of his Drupal Easy podcast about group. So you've got the group itself, obviously, which is, again, an entity, fully fieldable, all that good stuff. And then you've got things like articles, pages, and basically any other node type. And then, of course, you have users, which can be associated with a group. But group handles these by creating these relationship entities. And everything's really about the relationship entity, ultimately, because that's what controls whether a page that was created, if it's got a relationship entity, then its access is restricted by whatever group says, right? So, and same thing for a membership. The user's access to the group is determined by that membership entity. Does that kind of make sense? All right. So just to answer the original question, why or why not? I think the answer for D7 is a clear vote for organic groups. Again, I never used group for D7. It is out there, so feel free to try it out and shoot me a tweet or something and say, no, man, this D7 group's way better than organic groups. But I tend to doubt it, honestly, just because of the contrib factor alone. Having all those integrations with taxonomy and menus and stuff is just completely invaluable. And D8 at this moment is by far the clear winner in D8. Again, because organic groups doesn't really have a stable release yet. They're still working on it. This has been stable for a long time and has a lot of people actively working on it. So cool. All right, so I'm going to sit here for just a second to demo. And again, apologies. Whoops, did I do that? If it's a little disjointed, because I thought my presentation was in an hour. So great. So I'm just going to use this little site I spun up with Simply Test Me. We'll log in. So, of course, first thing you're usually going to do here is enable some modules. I have group node comes out of the box with group. I actually added, I don't know if we'll get to these or not, but just so you can see that there are already modules to try and integrate the media in core, as well as menus and menu blocks. I don't know if we'll get to those or not, but I'm going to install them anyways, and I'm going to turn on some other things that I want. And then path auto. Okay. I think that's all of it. Guess we'll see. No, devel. Any questions so far, real quick, before we get too far? It's more fun to kind of watch it happen anyway. So, devel. Turn devel on, just in case we find a reason to look at something in devel. Great. So then, of course, you've got this top level item now for groups, right? You've got a list of groups, if there are any. You got your group types. There are no group types yet. And then there's the settings at all the moment. All it has is whether you use the admin theme when you're in the group administration stuff. So I'm going to go to list. Let's add a group. Of course, you can't add a group when there's no types. So we're going to add a new type. I'm just going to call this band. We're going to do a little, like a fan website kind of thing. And we'll go through these real quick. Of course, the description is the description of the group itself. And you have a title field label. Oh, the description is the help text when you're creating a new group. So title field you can change to something like band name or whatever, just like your D8 nodes. So one checkbox at a time here. The group creator, you probably can't read that, can you? Yeah, you can. The group creator automatically becomes a member. Let's see if we can do that. Here, is that better? Yeah. All right. This will make sure that anyone who creates a group of this type will automatically become a member of it. Seems pretty obvious, but you may or may not want that functionality. You can turn that off so that when you create a group, you're not automatically a member. If you have somebody who's administering all the groups and they don't want to be part of the group, they're just creating them, you turn that off. Group creator must complete their membership. This one, I'll just read it real quick. It says, this will first show you the form to create the group and then a form to fill out your membership details. That basically saying to fill out that entity relationship entity that's in between the content you're creating and the group itself. You can choose to disable this wizard if you did not or will not add any fields to the membership. That's the key. So if you read this, it makes sense. I don't plan on adding any fields, so I'm going to uncheck this, but actually in this case I'm going to leave it checked just so you see why leaving it checked by default's a little awkward. Warning, if you have fields on membership and don't use the wizard, you may have required fields not filled out. Then you have automatically configure an administrative role, which is exactly what it sounds like, and then automatically assign that role to the creator or not. So let's do that. Cool. And of course, again, you've got an entity type that now has all of your tabs across the top plus a few new ones. So before we get into these other tabs, I want to, let's see, what should we look at first? Let's talk about associating content. Let's go to the content tab. So right now we have all these different entity types that have been created. Some of these obviously were just core, article, and basic page. Group membership comes out of the box as part of the group user submodule, essentially. Notice that it's already installed. These all say install, and this one also does not have an uninstall. You can't turn off group membership as a feature, which obviously makes no sense anyways. But any new content type we create will show up here in this list, and for every group type. So as you go through them, you have to enable the plugin that connects your group type to the content type, if that makes sense. So I'm just going to install the particle plugin and just walk through this real quick. Cardinality, the amount of band groups a single content entity can be added to as a group node article. This is the wording kind of stuff that I was talking about. It's a little confusing. And basically all it's saying, how many bands can you, how many articles can you add to a band? Unlimited. So we're not going to limit the number of articles they can create, but you could. The other one says, how many times can a single piece of content be associated with the same group? So theoretically, I can't think of a use case yet of, you could have a content type that allows, or not a content type, a plugin that allows an entity type to be associated with a group multiple times for whatever reason. You can do that, but your plugin has to define that. But the group node module defines this and locks this where you can't change this. So this one's actually, you actually can't see that on the screen, but this is disabled. So you can only add a node to a group once. The two-step wizard when creating new content type, again, this is the same as what you saw before on when you're creating a new group. It's talking about the membership entity. When you create a new group, do you have to fill out the fields of, whoops, I didn't mean to do that. I can't do that from here. Do you have to fill out the fields for the entity in between you and the group itself? And this is talking about between the group and the content. So same thing, you can define additional fields on that relationship entity to say why this content's being associated with this group or something. I have yet to use this personally, but I can see the utility. If you uncheck it, in our case, we're going to uncheck it because we know we're not going to have any relationship fields on the relationship entity. And then group menus, that's just from the group menu plugin that I turned on. Cool. So now you have article installed, and you can configure it, you can uninstall it, and you can do manage fields, form display, and display on this. Now this is, again, what this actually is the relationship entity. So if I configure fields on this, I'm adding fields that further define the relationship between the group and the piece of content that I associate with it. If I uninstall the plugin, it doesn't affect the content itself, So say somebody created an article at the top level of Drupal here, you associate it with a group, and then you later kill the relationship between that group type and that entity type. It doesn't affect the actual content. It just gets rid of that relationship entity in between. Does that make sense at all? Okay. So, again, we can turn on all these. I'm not going to mess with any of this stuff, but just so you can see that someone, has come up with a group media contrib module that all it does is plugs into this same ecosystem and says, all right, all types of media entities, all bundles of media entities are candidates for group content. Same thing for menus as well. Again, this group menu one specifically is only possible because of some of the patching that people have done on that issue that I mentioned earlier, where you can't associate config entities with a group. But this is proof that it's possible. It's under construction. So we're not going to get into that because I have no idea if it even works at this point. But we will do articles. So going back to our list of groups, which is empty, of course. A couple things I like to do out of the right off the bat. Once I've turned on all my types that I know I want. Of course, you can add path auto stuff here now because it's an entity just like anything else. So our groups, we're going to give them a path of band/node title, something like that. Limit it to bands and call that bands. Oh, whoops. Group title, duh. Not node title. Great. So that way when we go here and add our group, we have our, auto alias situation. Favorite band, anybody? Shout it out. Favorite band? Boston, nice. All right, so notice right here, first off, that it says create band and complete your membership. This is what I was talking about when we left that checkbox checked. So it's going to create the band, and now I have to go complete that intermediary relationship entity. Now in our case, it has no fields, so all it's going to do is say, so this is where I got confused the first time I used this. I'm going, where am I? Because not only does it say add group, but it says nothing about really what I'm doing here. It's really confusing to me. So that's something I really want to tackle soon with the people out there. So just so you can see that, I'm going to go back here and quickly change that configuration so that you do not have to complete your membership. But again, keep in mind, if you had a reason and you needed to describe the relationship as you're creating the content in the group, you can. Now that was creating the content, the group itself, which is actually the relationship you end up there is the one between you and the group as the creator.
Would an example of that be like if you want to say, I'm creating the band, I'm the manager, I'm the
Yeah, exactly, totally. Yeah, in fact, why not? Let's use it as an example. That's what demos are for.
And that field would show up on that second screen. Right,
exactly. So when I go to available content type, I'm going to manage fields here. You can do whatever you can say. Come on. So let's just say just a simple text field. Why you like this band. Whatever. So then, yeah, when you go to, I can make it required. So the argument about leaving that checked by default was, from the maintainer, was something in the area of, if you do add fields and you have groups created already, then you have this data integrity problem because you've added required fields after the fact. So that's why it's checked by default. I'm not sure I'm on board, but anyways. Groups, add a group, add Boston, create the band. And that actually didn't work that time because I think I had already had that field up, or that form up. So now let's add a new one. Apparently we have some problem with caching. That figures. That's funny. Let's do this. Never run into that before.
That box.
Huh?
I think you might have unchecked that box to
Oh, did I?
create the membership.
Damn.
Maybe.
I might have. Let's check it out. No. Types. Did I check? I did uncheck it. Let's put it back. Jeez. Alright. Starting over. Let's go back. Yeah, this form seems to be nicely cached here. I don't know what's up with that. Let's just keep going. Create and complete. So now, oh, I did it on the article, so we'll see it when we create an article. No, we won't though, because I turned that off. Now I'm all backwards now, see? Oh no. No, there's no telling. That's what I get for installing other modules that I wasn't planning on using. Live demos for the win. So back to here, what we should have done here was add that field here, not to the other thing. That's what I meant to do. Required, save, groups, add. Of course it's out of order because I didn't mess with the form at all. Yeah, it figures. That figures.
If you go back just to modify the Boston group that already exists,
Uh-huh.
you should be able to add to your relationship between them.
There, yeah, I can edit this relationship from me to the band and say they're great. That's why. And so now you have this extra field on the relationship entity. All that to show that. Cool. So let me look now at one thing I think. Actually, let me go back to here. When you go to related entities, I want to create a new entity. So I've got articles connected to my group type now. We know that much. I'm going to create a new entity. Now at this point, the only one I have available to me is articles. So I'm just going to do article, whoops, about Boston, the band, not the city. Right. Of course, you fill it out. You have all your normal Drupal node stuff. And we save that. Great. So let's look at the permissions now on this, on all this stuff. So permissions. We've got 4 roles, 3 really out of the box, and then 4 if you check the box that says automatically configure an administrative role. Anonymous is obviously anonymous. An outsider is someone with an account who's not a member. A member is a member. An admin is a role within this group. Now all of my group types can have different roles. So I could be like, have the manager of the band have a separate role where they can do more stuff than others. But point being, when you get to permission side of things, you've got all your normal expected permissions type checkboxes. Again, these are outside of Drupal. If you go to people and permissions, these are not there. In this case, admin obviously would want all of these. I've got an issue right now where I would like to see when you enable a new plugin and all these permissions are created, that these would automatically be given to the administrative role if it's configured. But we do want to say, let's say, allow only members to view the content entities of article that are within this group, right? So only members can see this. I always check the one for the relationship too, just to usually they match, but I guess depending on your configuration they may not. Okay, and then so now if I look at this article about Boston and I go to, I can't get out of this, out of here and go to my not incognito window and go here, It says member. That's not right. Why is that not working? That's where I checked that right. So view content entities. I wonder if, see, I shouldn't be able to see this as an anonymous user based on the permissions, and it worked last night, so I don't know what to tell you. Maybe because that band was created before I checked the permissions off. Let's try a new one. Let's just for fun. See if it makes any difference. Where?
Rebuild your permissions.
Yeah, I think that's probably the key. Let's go to, I think it's here, not there. Status report. Oh, it's right there. It keeps popping up all the time after you start building group anyways. So.
Do you have to do that every time after you create a?
I think it may have something to do with adding a new, like enabling a new plugin is when it kicks back in and wants you to do that. Not sure why it doesn't just automatically rebuild permissions. I guess it might take a long time depending on what you have in there content wise. Now let's go here. No difference. Okay, so let's just add a new one and see if that makes a difference. They're good. So this is, but it didn't give me a place to add the damn name of the band. What's going on here? Something's broken. And again, it's probably my fault for turning on stuff that I wasn't planning on using. So let's just deal with that really quickly. Sorry, guys. Yeah, guys. No, there's a gal. Let's turn these off. Hopefully overall you're getting the idea anyways. It's not that terribly complicated, especially if you've dealt with organic groups in the past. A lot of it makes a lot of sense. I think the configuration makes a lot more sense, other than that one little weird thing to me. But
it strikes me though as a little bit like some of the stuff that happens in media. You know, they've made it very click, but you have to maintain this giant conceptual model in your head to know what's going on. So if you come up with any strategies for like actually designing your groups and then being able to go through this in a sort of predictable fashion where you don't miss that one step like you potentially did today and then spend the rest of the day figuring out, okay, where did I go wrong?
I agree. I agree. Let's
Well, there was a question part on the end, which is like, how do you solve that?
You got me, man. I'm see, it's still not even giving me the place to fill in the name of the band. So I don't know what's up with that.
My experience is some of it is made keeping the number of group types down as best you can. That there are places where you need a lot of types, but one of the things that I find different about groups versus OG is that it's not that ability in organic groups to just like let the community run rampant is not hooked into groups. That's not a base assumption of groups the way it is with OG. And for most times people use OG, that's the right assumption. Like anybody creating a group use case is relatively rare. So it's a better, I think, fit for most of the applications. And with that comes that assumption that the groups that are getting created are being created in a slightly more controlled environment, so there should be a little more top-down management, like your group behaves this way.
That's a good point.
And so you get it in, you get it right. It becomes an information architecture problem more than kind of an ongoing management issue.
Yeah.
Get it right the first time, and then don't have to.
Don't mess with it.
Don't mess with it.
Leave well enough alone. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what's going on, why it keeps throwing these errors. I'm sure we could look and figure it out together, but I think we've covered the basics here. So I'm going to just flip back to my presentation. I do have some recaps of what we were supposed to see. You've got, of course, you got to enable the modules. Again, each entity type that wants to integrate with groups can easily plug into that system, like group node does, like the group media module is supposed to be doing, the group menu module, etc. You got to add new types. When you create a new type, you have all these fields. Again, that one little field that might trip you up, or that checkbox that could trip you up, just be careful. And that checkbox determines kind of what the button says when you're creating one. It should, if it's set up to make you fill out the membership, it'll say create band and complete your membership. If it's not, it'll say create band and become member. And if you don't even have the role assigned to the creator, it just says create, whatever your group type is. And again, with the plugins, any plugins that are enabled, or modules that provide plugins, I guess I should say, if those modules are installed, you have that relationship entity that gets created in between that entity type and your group type. And you have the configuration that we mentioned with the two-step wizard situation again, where you uncheck that if you're not going to have any relationship fields. Again, uninstalling a plugin doesn't affect the content itself, but the relationship between the two. And this is just a simple example over here of that's all it takes to enable, theoretically, just to make it where they'll show up on this list. So if you wanted to enable commerce products as group entities, you could do that with this really simple plugin with the annotations, just filled in just so. And that's the basic, way to integrate, but I'm sure there's more to it. You'd have to probably get through, views integration and all that stuff that would be fun to work through. And then you have the permissions. Again, you've got your 3 default permission or role types plus an admin one if you set it up to have one, and then all of your permissions. There's some permissions that you obviously are going to want to mess with right off the bat, like allow everyone to view the group. How else are they going to join it if they don't know it's there? That was kind of a weird thing to me. Maybe don't disallow the admin role to leave a group. I'm not even sure if that would work since it's an admin role and it probably gets all the permissions anyways. Each different content type that's enabled, you have all of the permissions for the CRUD operations for each type, as well as the relationship entity between that type and your group. Then you have the related entities tab. So once you've started creating users in the group, giving them a membership and a role, you have a list of all of the related entities and what plugins use and stuff like that. You can't add members from here, which I thought was a little weird. There's another patch out there for when you click create new entity in group, there's no option to create a new user and add them to the group at the same time. But there is a module out there, or a patch for that. This is just a really quick slide about views and blocks. There is views integration. It's functional. Actually, I haven't spent a ton of time building views with this. I've had a little bit of trouble where I did build view from groups, and it seems like using the group content, that relationship entity in between, might actually be easier than trying to go from the content itself through the relationship to the group, if that makes sense. And blocks also has a visibility section right out of the box, so you can say this block's only visible to this group type, for instance. As this was just brainstorming the things that we could use, flags are fieldable entities, so I imagine you could have group flags, you could have, you could have better, this was more like if we were building a really robust fan base website that we were working on, you could have comments and you could have voting and all that, and it would be all within the context of just that group. Have a view of who's most popular, stuff like that. Anyway, this was just ideas I was thinking about adding to this demo, but I never have time to do anything with it. So, bunch of to-dos, but that was the thing about the defaults I thought was a little odd. Might need to be changed, but doesn't sound like he wants to change that. So So be it. Group content being the terminology finds a lot of people find that confusing. It's a relationship entity in my head. Contextual filters I had problems with. Group add form caching, which you actually saw, so I've obviously been experiencing that since I first put this together. And groups add, oh right. So when you're like in the little drop down menu, it's a stupid little addition, but it'd be nice if you had group types, add a group and have drop down of the types if you had a bunch of types. Whole bunch of links about group. There's tons of other material out there that's probably better than mine. But this is as good a summary as I could squeeze into 40 minutes, I guess. I wish the demo had gone a little better. But yeah, you get the idea. Any questions?
Not really a session, though someone's live demo goes up.
Right, yeah. It's not a live demo unless it goes wrong. All right. No questions? Awesome. All right, thank you guys.